So namaste, welcome to this Ask Helen Anything, and this is volume 28 now. So just before we dive into reading the comments and questions from the previous one, volume 27, just to let you know that if there's anything you want to ask about awakening, you can leave a comment under this video here on YouTube, and probably in about a month from now, we'll review all the comments and record the next session like we're doing here. So anything to do with awakening at all that is on your mind, or if you want to celebrate a breakthrough, I always love to hear that, or if you're struggling with something as well and just need some help and support, just leave a comment under here. So as always, Karen is here with me and ready to read for me the comments. So whenever you're ready, Karen, thank you.
Okay. Your first comment or question is from Ami. She says, "Hi, Helen. Do you have any masters, gurus you feel have helped you along your journey? Sorry if you've answered this before. Bless."
Yeah, it's this Krishna here next to me, and developing a deeper and deeper understanding of Krishna. But really, the Buddha and Christ in the early days of my awakening, really, I feel like I got a lot of help from them. And I've also studied just about every single spiritual pathway and a religious pathway, some of the psychological methods, everything, as many as I could. Spent about 20 years really just reading and researching everything from the ancient Upanishads to modern day teachers like Adyashanti and Muji and everything in between, really. From St. John of the Cross to Meister Eckhart, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, yep, over and over, just tried to dive into everything that seemed to have the truth emanating from it, and really just to find out what truth was originally, and then, later down the path, trying to figure out how to awaken myself. So it's been a diverse exploration, and it's kind of all come together into whatever this teaching is, and however it presents itself, a mishmash of a whole load of different styles that have worked for me, little bits from and large bits from certain teachings that really made the difference in my own awakening. So yeah, I hope that that helps. Thanks, Karen.
A comment from Lori saying, "Thank you, Helen. As always, a great session."
Thank you.
And this question is for Mary. "Helen, I'm so grateful that I found you and your channel. Doing contemplation is the way you teach it. Doing contemplation the way you teach it has made such an amazing difference for me. My questions are, how did you know you were ready to be a spiritual teacher? And how long have you been a spiritual teacher? With much love and appreciation, Mary."
I'm so glad the practices that we're doing are having a good effect for you. It's so nice to hear, and that, finally to find a way out of suffering is just so amazing, isn't it? And yeah, I don't think I've ever really felt like now I'm ready to be a spiritual teacher. In fact, it was quite the opposite. For 2024 now, so probably about 22 years ago, 21 years ago maybe. I had 3 children at the time, and they were at school, and during the day, me and a couple of friends used to meet in a local cafe or restaurant here. And it was just, a group of 4 of us. Our kids were at school for a couple of hours, and we were just celebrating some freedom. And the conversation would turn towards spiritual matters, basically. And it got to be a regular thing on a Wednesday morning. And that was 3 or 4 years really. And somebody said to me out of that group that I seem to have a way with words. And then eventually I ended up doing satsang in my home here after about another 2 years of resisting. And probably another year or so of 1, 2 people turning up, and still felt very, very resistant to it. And gradually over the next 5 or 6 years, it just began to grow a little bit. It got too big for the house here, and people started asking for meditation, things like that, as well as satsang. So we rented a room. So there was about 9 or 10 people, and we used to meet regularly, a room not too far from here. Still, I felt very, very resistant and was constantly criticizing myself about my capacity. And as my own awakening deepened, it was really only the last 5 or 6 years that I've actually felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or not doing, non-doing, that this is what this body and mind has skills at. And still, even then, there was resistance. And it's perhaps fair to say that life has pushed me forwards despite my digging my heels in. And really now it feels joyful, it feels fun, and I still get nervous when there's a big group of people, but that is way less than it used to be, and it's not something that kind of paralyzes me like it used to do. And there isn't, thank goodness, the constant analysis of, after I finish recording this, before there would have been an analysis of like everything I said wrong or did wrong. And the personal self hung on this imaginary separate self for a long time in this area, and as I'm grateful to say, it finally disappeared. And yeah, so maybe I've come to over the years to realize maybe I'll never feel 100% comfortable, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I'll never take it for granted, or find myself just doing it because it ought to be done. And there's always a deep sense of being blessed and been given so much, and a real urge to use what I've experienced to shortcut that for others, hopefully. So that's why your beginning of your statement was really, really lovely to hear. I always love hearing that, and in some way it validates my own journey as well. The fact that I could use what happened to help other beings, and all the practices we do are coming out of my own direct experience of what actually worked during my own awakening. So I guess nearly 20 years, but most of those 10 years at least was just very, very informal. And then the last 10 years have been a journey to a place of healthy self-esteem in my own. When I first started putting things on YouTube, I still had a lot of self-doubt inside, and that reflected back to me in so not so pleasant feedback. So I had to really look at that and come to love myself and turn that around. But it's been the deepest part of my awakening, learning to express this and to love to do it. So yeah, I couldn't think of anything else I'd rather be doing now. Hasn't always been that way though. So it's been a journey. Yeah. Thanks, Karen.
So we have a comment from Sounds of Silence. Thank you, Helen. Your answers were extremely helpful to me also. And another one from Beijing Mao, who says, Helen, you are so sweet. Thanks for diving into the tattoos inquiry. Hard not to love you.
Thank you.
This one is from Aaron. Thank you, Helen. It was a pleasure attending the retreat with you and Palmyra. My question is, what would you recommend to keep the mind completely in silence while the body is helping in the human family with the stressful situation of my father having a terminal illness and only a couple of weeks left in the illusion of this realm? The human family that my character is with are not awakened, and they are going through a lot of volatility with emotions, with my character's father's last moments in the phenomenal plane. How can my character cope with the family while maintaining a point of stillness? Through this highly volatile moment of emotions. Thank you. Namaste.
That sounds like it's a intense time for you. Yeah, and it was lovely to me to retreat. And your question, I think that one of the best things that awakening has taught me is authenticity. In fact, we could substitute that word for awakening, authenticity, awakening. And going through difficult times is going to bring up emotions. First, in your own self, of course, in those around you. And maybe just to accept, if you can, that you might not actually be able to keep the mind in silence, and that emotions are going to arise and thoughts are going to happen. And there's a process that each human being goes through when we lose a loved one. And even if we recognize that that being isn't actually dying, their body is going, but they will still be here, still there's going to be some emotion for you. And awakening took away for me all my ideas about what awakening would look like, dealing with a situation like that. When my own father passed, there was emotion, there was tears, there was also joy for him because he'd been very ill for a long time. And all of those were allowed against the backdrop of peace. The peace was there continuously because that's coming from the recognition of who we are. And who we really are also completely authentically shows up as a human being as well. And what that looks like in any particular moment, we don't know. We'll find out as everyone else does, right? If you need to cry, you cry. If you need some time alone, you do that the best you can. If you need to say something that's not so comfortable to someone else, you might find that courage coming forth to do so. Whatever is needed in that situation will arise authentically. And probably the best strategy really is to have no strategy about how to move through this time. And maybe it's gone further than when you originally sent this in. And if so, I feel that, I really hope that you're able to honor what you need in this process too. It's also easy to forget your own self and what you need. It's also very tiring to be in a situation like that. It can be. So making sure, just on a human level, that you get enough rest and food and all of those things. But spiritually speaking, the more we resist what is, the more we're going to suffer. So there can be peace and all kinds of negative emotions showing up for you. Anger, frustration, grief, of course, sadness, whatever is appearing, but no suffering if you're authentically allowing it. Suffering and negative emotions are not the same thing, although we do tend to confuse them as human beings. So sending all my love to you and your family, and hope for a smoother transition as possible for your father. Thanks, Karen.
Next question is from Shakti Dancer, and she says, thank you, Helen, for the many opportunities to ask you anything and to recognize truth. Grateful for the amazing teacher that you are. One of the most difficult things to transcend as a human for me is when there's conflict with another human body. I know I can do my practices and work on myself. After self-inquiry in lesson 4, the knowing that another apparent human is also formless or self-appearing as another body I can truly meet. I can come to know it is a gift, an opportunity to see where separation is showing up. Things are happening spontaneously, and I can't get it wrong. I recognize it's likely not going to be useful to discuss what I'm learning here with other humans. While I'm still in the process of awakening, triggers still occur and moments of separate self happen. Do you have any insights on how to navigate conflict in myself in the moment when there is a conversation or argument happening with another human?
Yeah, it's a good subject. One that I really struggled with myself for so long. And just in case anyone is not aware, lesson 4 that was referred to here is lesson 4 of the Dissolving the Ego course, which we study as part of the community that we have growing, which anyone is welcome to join at any time. You can just go to the website helenhamilton.org, and you'll be able to see on the homepage there a link to it. And this, in lesson 4, we look at how form and formless are the same thing, how to come to it, to live as unity, as oneness. And part of the many places that we find that challenging is when there's another human being or we might have some friction with, or some sense of conflict arising, where what you want and what that other being wants might be very different things in that moment. So obviously, applying what we're learning here, that there is only one being, and it can appear as very, very different forms, right? Very different ways. And most of all, as much as we can, keeping in mind that that being is our own self. But at the same time, valuing what is right for us in that. So some people will use, accidentally without realizing, the recognition that this being is myself as a way to subdue their own wants and needs, or set some boundaries. Or it might also come from a little sense of unworthiness. So that's the other thing to check. So firstly, remembering that you're not separate to them, as you mentioned. Secondly, just checking if there's any little sense of unworthiness there that's not allowing you to speak up for what you need or want in a loving, gentle, but truthful way, so that we're not negating what you need in that, because that sometimes perpetuates the conflict. And for me, thirdly, just accepting, if you can, that you might never like conflict or like a lot of friction in a relationship. For me, I still don't really like it. When it happens, and there's some action I need to take, you can kind of come to that place as the infinite self where I can speak something or take some action. But there's a recognition that perhaps as peace-loving, truth-loving beings, we might never really like some sense of conflict in a relationship or anywhere in the world. So for a long time, I tried to come to a place where I was okay with it. And of course, I am on a deeper level. There's always peace no matter what, and a sense of joy underneath that, and love for the other being. Then there's also a healthy respect for the fact that maybe our vibrations are just a little different in the mind and body, and we might want different things, and that might not ever feel totally comfortable to us. It became clear as well that certain beings who are not yet quite so interested in truth might still like, in some way, or want or need some sense of conflict. For me, when I was very, very asleep to who I was, that was the only way I knew how to ask for love, paradoxically. So coming right around sort of 360 degrees helps us to have more compassion for those. That's might be the best way they can ask for love too, or approval, but that's never going to feel comfortable. And maybe you can feel inside some acceptance that there's not a thing that's wrong with you in that. It's just that you prefer peace and unity and compassion over judgment and all of those things. So I'm not only saying that as well because quite often we tend to feel that there's something still wrong with us that we need to correct. And somehow we should come to a place where we're okay with it. And maybe that place doesn't exist. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks, Karen.
So we have a question from Deborah. She says, greetings from Australia, beloved Helen. Your encouragement to see that we might have run past our destination. I've been helped greatly by going reality first, then just trusting that karma, neurotic fear, etc. will dissolve. However, last night I needed to present in a group and answer questions. It went well, but I was more anxious than ever. Today I feel wiped out and wonder whether any of this personhood is dissolving at all. I should add that I've noticed I'm much more loving and calm in some other challenging times. I feel self-dislike is at the base. Will it suffice to keep going straight to God, zooming out, etc., and trust that this will eventually seep into all and bring self-love? Or should I add contemplation again? Sincere thanks, Deborah.
It's really up to you. If you feel it's going at the pace that you want, then stay with what you're doing. However, I do feel that I sense from what you're writing that you would like it to be a little faster. So perhaps adding in contemplation there too, and self-inquiry if you want to, because to meditation is one way, self-inquiry as well will work hand in hand with that to see who you really are. And then contemplation to help gently dissolve. We're seeing who we really are, the real self, but the energies in the egoic sense of self might still be very contracted. So we sometimes, I know I did, need some contemplation to help dissolve those. So by looking at the emotions and uncovering the hidden story underneath them, and yeah, judging that your progress from other signs, such as, like you said, you are maybe quicker to come back to equilibrium after being so disturbed in the mind and body, and perhaps quicker to be kinder to yourself, that you did the best you could with the presentation, and not so much judging that because this eruption in the separate sense of self is happening, that it means we're doing something wrong. For me, I'd be looking for signs. Did I was I kinder to myself afterwards, even if I perhaps wasn't while I was doing it? And maybe if I was terrified while I was doing it, I still managed to do it, the presentation, I mean. And all of those things are very, very important signs of progress. For me, I had to look for those, because the trigger moments happened for as long as they happened, but they were reducing in the length, how long it took to go from very, very disturbed back to some kind of equanimity was shortening. So it's good to notice those things, right? And our capacity even to reach out for help like you've done here. Maybe there'll be a time when you couldn't do that. So, looking at those, but it sounds like you might find it beneficial to just add a little contemplation in there. But celebrating the fact that you did it, you did the presentation anyway. And that is huge. So well done on that. Thanks, Karen.
Question from Super Nourish. I have difficulty locating the energy in my body. For that reason, my attention goes mostly to the mind and the story that goes with the emotions. I would appreciate any advice on this. Thank you.
So yeah, it's very common. Every emotion that we have, if you imagine the emotion being kind of in the middle, there's a subconscious or unseen or not willing to be seen story underneath that. And the mind is telling stories on top of that, trying to explain why we feel this emotion. It's looking for reasons from the outside world to explain why we feel a certain way. That person or that thing makes me feel this way. But as you pointed to, there's an idea underneath the emotion. And, fear, for example, for me, fear said that I'm not safe. And anger said that I can't get what I want or need. So I had to really question those, as we do in contemplation. There's some videos on the YouTube channel, playlists on contemplation. And in that, we learn to turn that belief into a question. Is it really true? I'm not safe. And that for me was the only way to question consistently when this thing came up. Was the only way to undo it, because we can't be questioning if something is true, actually, and believing it at the same time. They're polar opposites. So mostly attention goes to mind and the emotion and the experience as well, because we don't really know anywhere else to put attention, right? We just goes out of habit. This is a thought that I pay attention to. This is very important. So attention goes automatically there like it has. But if we can remember in that moment, or as soon afterwards as we can, you might not be able to remember straight away if there's a big emotional turbulence going on. Wait a minute, let me question if this is really true. And then we just allow all the answers that want to come to that. Some will agree, yes, it's true. And then some will say, no, it's not true. And there'll be, as we explore in the contemplative method, there's sounds, sensations in the body, things in our environment even are counted as answers. Because the only reason we tend to suffer is we only listen to the thought answers, the mind answers, or to the emotional answers. Contemplation is a way of taking attention off of that particular thought. And because whatever we put attention on is going to get bigger, get more intense in our experience. And we're bringing it back to the truth by asking an open question. Is this really true? And it's very effective, very powerful. Use it myself to work my way out of believing those things. And alongside meditation as well, it's a very, very powerful tool. It works even just on its own. You can either believe a thought or you can question it. And there's nowhere in between that. It's one or the other. So as we're questioning even one thought, one belief, I'm not safe, as an example, we're also openly questioning everything. We can't believe a thought in that moment. So questioning for me became a way of life. And perhaps even before all the emotion is gone and the experience is turned around in our lives, we're already not suffering because we're asking an open question. Suffering is going to be different than the actual emotion. The emotion can still be there in the body, but we're not suffering when we're asking the question openly and curiously. So have a go and see. There's a playlist on here on YouTube, contemplation. If you haven't already, that would be the first thing I'd recommend to come out of it much, much faster. Thanks, Karen.
This is from Maria. Hello, Helen. I would like you to support me through the loss of a very dear kitten. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's still one of the challenging places in my life. I lost one of my two adult cats last year, and there were some tears, a lot of tears. Also the realization that he's not really gone, but still it can be very, very challenging with our furry family, our four-legged family. So sending all of my love to you and for the smoothest transition through that grief process for you. Thanks, Karen.
Courtney says, thank you so much for answering my questions. It was very helpful, and I'm so grateful for your support.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a question from Lushika. Hi, Helen. I would be interested in your opinion about importance of family. I don't mean here husband and kids, but rather mother, father, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles. I come from a family in which my parents had started relationships with their siblings, later cut off. And this spread to us, their children. Most of my adult life, I live almost completely disconnected from my extended family. In the meantime, also, my parents divorced, but I remain close to both. Recently, I learned a theory which explains the importance of being connected to family. Since then, 2 years, I tried to reconnect with as much cousins as possible. I managed to reestablish some connections, and I was very happy about it. Yet there is still quite noticeable pattern of distance between us. And so sometimes I just feel so depressed and lonely.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So for me, a lot of my extended family, I've never really been that close to, and I had to really look at that inside my own self, because I wanted to make sure it wasn't from some place of needing something, or so we can have a relationship with family members, but it might be a place that our karmic patterns are going to reflect. if you are feeling some kind of negative emotion around a lack of ability to connect, then I'd suggest looking at the emotions themselves using the contemplation technique. Because most likely it isn't about your family members at all. It's about an idea that needs to be examined. In the question just before this, we were talking about contemplation. So maybe skip back and listen to the previous answer. Whatever thoughts are unexamined, then we're going to be believing them and experiencing them. So even if you and your family member want to connect and have a healthy relationship, it's going to be quite challenging with beliefs on both sides. And as you contemplate, if this belief is really true, then you're going to be able to help that other being as well, just by the fact that you are that other being. So I think it's an individual thing, right? Some of us really value those lots of deeper connections. Some not so much, and some are happy with just one or two connections and everything in between. But if we can root out these karmic patterns, we'll know for certain then we're not making decisions from, I think you mentioned loneliness and depression. And those, when we're trying to connect from that place, when we're feeling alone, it's going to be hard to have the kind of relationship that we want. Paradoxically, as we realize there is no one else to connect with, that they're all your own self, then that connection becomes rich and deep and intimate. And my own awakening has asked me to look at the close family relationships in my life and to work through what I needed from those beings, such as a sense of safety, what I was unconsciously asking for, respect, love, approval, all of those things, so that I could actually really be in relationship with them without it being a bargaining. You know, they're not asking me for anything, I'm not asking them for anything. Most humans' relationship is really just coming from some bargaining backwards and forwards. And in that, we can't really find that deep connection that we're looking for. So a sense of being alone, or, you know, that's pointing to, it's coming from a separate sense of self. And, you know, some self-inquiry, if you can, also would help. Working through these karmic patterns and coming to the point where you don't need anything from these family members, then you'll find that naturally what's right for you becomes obvious. And for some of us, that is just that, you know what, I don't have so much in common with these beings anymore. My life has taken a different turn. Or it's really, really nice to reconnect with them on a deeper level. And perhaps free of our own sense of separation, or increasingly more free of it, we can really show up for a relationship in its fullness and its richness, even if that other person is totally unaware of who they really are. So I suggest having a look at the reasons why you want to connect first. And then after that, it'd be very clear what you want then. Thanks, Karen.
Pop Mock says, big thank you. I wonder if you could speak about chronic symptoms and awakening, like emotions and thoughts. It would seem like the body also manifests very long-term experiences, which can be quite painful. For example, I'm experiencing a multinodal goiter, which can be tiring and strangling at times. It seems to rise and fall, and there's a sense also that it is intimately linked with grief, fear, and difficulties with expression, for example. Not trying to get rid of the symptoms, but being present to it feels the most relevant. I'm not keen to take medical approach until it's no longer avoidable. I'd be interested to hear your insights on chronic symptoms, as it feels like they are, like the rest of the body, a manifestation with vibrations, and maybe they too can flow.
Yeah, absolutely. The body is our diagnostic tool, we could say, a vibrational meter to point us to something that we could look at deeper inside. My own body told me many times when there was something to look at, and still often does. Because as a apparent separate being, we've all developed ways of avoiding some emotional states that we perhaps tried to feel or tried to solve, feeling lonely, feeling angry, feeling abandoned, feeling scared, feeling whatever that feeling was that we had. The only option we had was to push that emotion away, because the belief that is underneath it is impossible to really solve as a separate being. If I feel really scared from a sense that my existence is finite and limited, from thinking I'm a separate self that's going to reach an end point, there's literally no way for me to solve that fear as a separate being, apparent separate being. And so the fear, all we can do is kind of squash it down. Sometimes anger, it gets projected onto others, guilt, shame, all of that. And the body will tell us when there's something there that we just haven't wanted to look at. And none of us want to look at emotions. But as we realize who we really are, we find there's capacity to feel what we couldn't feel and resolve what we couldn't resolve. And when I realize I'm deathless and timeless, fear begins to disappear. So I absolutely agree that anything I don't know is there, in terms of thoughts, beliefs, I'm not safe, I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me, we will have to experience emotionally. And if we're not able to experience it emotionally because we don't have the tools to deal with it, then sometimes it has to show up physically. It also shows up in our other areas of our life, financially, in our relationships, in our career, everywhere. But perhaps the body could be a very, very challenging area because our body goes everywhere we go, right? And it's in our face totally. So I would suggest gently looking for the emotions that these symptoms are a reflection of. I would also suggest, I know you said you're open to medical help if there's no other option. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't take that, but maybe look at if there's any resistance to that, any beliefs around. For me, there was a sense that traditional medical help wasn't safe, that I had to really work through. So again, I'm not advising any course of action there. I'm just asking you to look at a belief underneath that, maybe. So emotions might be obvious when this comes up. If it's a kind of a strangling feeling, you might feel a lot of fear at that point, just as an example. And the mind will say there's fear because of this physical situation, but it's really more the other way around. The physical situation is reflecting fear, which is a reflection of this idea that we're not safe, that we're going to cease to exist at some point. So again, contemplation is the most gentle way to challenge these ideas. And I've spoken about it, the previous two questions as well. There's also, so maybe listen to those if you haven't, the previous two questions before yours. Also on the YouTube channel, there's a playlist on there to help with contemplation as well. And just gently looking at the emotion. If the emotions aren't obvious, that's okay, that's normal too. You might have to sit with them for a little while and be willing to see. We've all spent so willing to feel as well, so long getting strategies how to avoid feeling these emotions as a separate person. So for me with shame, which I eventually found out it said I don't deserve to exist. I had to really cultivate some willingness to look at this, to feel it, because I knew there was something there. My body was shouting at me. But I just got this protective mechanism locked down, like this is my shame in here and I push it over here, never to be looked, because it hurts too much and there's no way to resolve it. And human beings, unfortunately, that's the only way we learn to deal with emotions. And until we come to them consciously on the path to awakening. So hope that helps. The body will only have to show us something until we are willing and able to look at it emotionally. That may take a little time to build that willingness, but once you figure out it's not your fault that you've been unwilling to see it. And that's why we have a body as well, right? That way of being able to, the body won't lie to us as much as sometimes we want it to. It's going to tell us when there's something to look at, and there's no way around that. So have a ponder on that, and if you do need more help, please do write back in. Thanks, Karen.
By the way, says, this is James Evans. Thank you for everything you offer and for this community. I'm a newbie to your teaching, but not newbie to teachings. Your practices are excellent, yet appear very prescriptive. This seems contradictory with the fact that nothing is being done. Please speak to this.
Yep, absolutely. It's a very common thing, and welcome to the teachings, by the way. It sounds like, you know, a lot is being told, you know, like do this and do that, but it's really just working with a sense of a doer. While there is a sense of someone doing, that's still being believed in on any level, then we need something to do, right? The practices are something for that doer to do, not to dissolve that separate being, because it never really exists, but just to dissolve the idea that there's anything to dissolve. So dissolving the ego or transcending the mind is only letting go of the idea that there was anything different that had happened to us in the first place, since we were originally as we are now still. So while there's a sense of a doer, it will seem like I'm doing something. Okay, now I'm going to go sit down and meditate. Or now I'm going to do some self-inquiry or contemplation. And for a long time, it felt like that for me too. And the sense of someone doing. Parcel delivery, sorry about that. So the sense of someone doing something will gradually begin to fade as you're engaging in these practices. But you can prove it to yourself right now, right? If you'd actually try to find who's doing the practice, like who is it that decides I'm going to sit down now and meditate? It was quite shocking to me the first time. I was sitting there ready to meditate, and I tried to find the one who'd made the decision, and it was just not there. And for me, there's always a sense of a person, a sense of someone, but I've never been able to find it all the times I've looked. Just never been able to find it at all. So you can prove that to yourself if you want to do some inquiry right now and see. It might seem prescriptive, but really, you and I are one. So it seems like someone here is giving someone over there instructions, but really you're talking to your own self there, right? And as weird as that may be, these practices are just arising spontaneously inside from the desire that the infinite self has when it appears as a human form, to see itself, to know itself, to understand itself, what it really is and what it isn't. So the practices are all happening spontaneously, as incredible as that may be. And maybe you've had a glimpse of that, maybe not. One of the ways that desire manifests as a human being to wake up to who we really are is as good habits of practice. Good habits belonging to nobody, as weird as that sounds. So hope that helps. Thanks, Karen.
This is from Adam. Thank you, Helen. As advised, I am posting my question here. It seems like there is no difference between awareness of object and the object. Am I wrong?
You are not wrong. There is no difference at all. One of the major ways we sustain the sense of a separate being or an egoic sense of self is by believing in a subject-object divide. I'm here and I stop here, and the object I'm perceiving or experiencing is external to me. The food I'm eating is different than the body it's going into, and all of those things. So if you have begun to see that that's not really true, that you can't actually find a place where you stop and your experience starts, then the whole thing begins to fall down very, very quickly. And you can Practice, if you're sitting in a room with another being, and can you find where you stop and they start? And I used to love, uh, it was very, very helpful to do this when I was meeting my family, Christmas dinner, when there tend to be some interesting conversations. Let's just leave it at that. But you can play with it, right? Even if you're holding just a cup of coffee, where do I stop and the coffee starts? We all really think we know that somewhere inside. Just to play with and examine that, it becomes, every time you see it, that I've just imagined a border and a boundary between me who perceives and that which is perceived, or me who's experiencing and what is experienced. Yeah, but you're absolutely correct, and just keep going deeper with that. Thanks.
And the last question is from FS5 Storm. Are affirmations helpful for presence and self-love? What is your opinion? Thanks.
Good question. It really depends who's doing them, right? For me, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for 4 or 5 years every morning and told myself I was beautiful and everyone loved me. And it felt terrible. I mean, absolutely terrible. It felt like a lie. And it made me feel worse than it did before. And that was, back when I really thought I was a separate self. I had a lot of self-hatred in there, a lot of self-hatred. And later, realizing, starting to realize I'm not actually separate to anything, and realizing why that hatred was there, because I was trying to change who I was based on an erroneous assumption that I'm not good enough in the first place. So when I would say things like that, then they felt extraordinarily different, joyful, like the same thing that brought some negative emotion at first. And even added to a sense of shame that why don't these affirmations work for me? I've tried everything and every technique I can possibly think of to build a healthy self-esteem, and it just wasn't happening. In fact, it was getting worse. The more spiritual tools I tried, and they didn't bring the results I wanted because of the belief underneath that I didn't deserve happiness or abundance or any of those things, abundance of peace and joy. I was using every practice I did to prove my own sense of unworthiness. So they just all piled on top, affirmations included. So doing this as a separate self may be helpful. Doing them as the infinite self, very, very joyful. And you might not even need them from there. So I'd suggest just testing how they feel. If they feel really good, then have at it. If they don't, then maybe consider, is there some belief under there that, because we can affirm forever and it won't get to the deep rooted beliefs underneath. Most times it won't get to the, so I might be affirming my life flows, it's rich with abundance, but deep down I don't feel worthy of that at all. I am, but I don't feel it. So I can't possibly let it into my life. And after a while of trying some spiritual practice and failing, sometimes that hatred starts to compound self-hatred even more. See, look, you can't even get this right. And around we go. So hope that helps. And thank you so much, Karen, for reading, as always. So just a quick recap. If you do have a question or something you would like me to comment on next time, which will be in about a month from the date that this is posted, just leave a comment under here and we will get to it next time when we do the next one. Thank you for being here and sending in your beautiful comments and questions. Thank you. Namaste.